Hey guys, what's up? I want to dig into a little bit of the language that we use when we pray. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't consider who they're praying to, um, or the implications of the names that they're attributing to God when they pray. I just don't think we think about it very often. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think there's a depth that we're missing out on that could come if we unpack this a little bit. So I love language. I love the implications of the language that we use. So I'm really looking forward to digging into this a little bit. So quick to start off, let's talk about sociology a little bit. I'm not an expert on this, but I've done a little bit of research. So if you were to take you have all these different social structures that exist in the world, right? If you're going to go down to like the smallest social structure, you would find what they call a dyad. A dyad exists between two people. It's where every relationship exists. The only relationship you've ever had with anybody is a dyad. It's just two people. It's a social structure where there's two people. Um, and the interesting thing about a dyad is every relationship is so unique because there's unique people in each relationship. So no relationship is going to be the same between any relationship that exists out there. Now the way that a dyad works is you're here and the other person's here, and you're gonna see that person in such a way you're gonna start assigning roles to them. You're going to assume appropriate behavior from them and for yourself out of that. So the role that you assign to this other person, um, it's basically going to determine how you act, how you speak, how you connect with them. It's going to inform a lot of the assumptions that you make about the relationship. It's going to influence. It's going to influence whether or not you're willing to be vulnerable. Maybe you'll isolate yourself. Will you feel safe in that relationship? So, in short, how I see the other person is actually going to define how I see myself within that relationship. Okay? Stick with me here. How does this affect our relationship with God? That's a big question here, right? So dyads are the only thing that we know or have ever experienced when it comes to actual relationships. It's messy because it brings in all these expectations and assumptions, and I'm assigning a role to you based on how I see you, and that's affecting how I see myself and what appropriate behavior would be right for me here. But a lot of those assumptions might be false and totally bogus, and I shouldn't be doing that, but it's still there and it's still a thing. And, okay, so it's messy, one, but I think it's really helpful to evaluate the roles that we've assigned to God, and then let's explore a little bit the implications that those roles, God's roles, will have on us as we interact with Him. So, the primary way that we assign a role to a person, or in this case God, is through the use of titles. So, a title is a way of consolidating these roles and all the expectations of weirdness and assumptions and appropriate behavior and all that stuff. It kind of consolidates it down into a nice, clean little word, one word. So parent, mom or dad or boss or president or king we have all these different titles, right? So we assign these titles to a person to kind of bring definition and establishes some basic relational standards. What's appropriate, what's not appropriate, right, within this relationship. So it helps define how people are supposed to interact within that relationship. A primary title that is used in the Christian church today for God is the term Lord. Okay? Very common. Most people, this is just my experience, that could be totally wrong, but I think most people default to calling God Lord when they pray. It's just very, very common. I think we've just kind of picked it up. You listen to other people pray, and you're like, you're just starting out. Maybe you're a kid, or maybe you just came into the faith, and you're like, okay, How is everybody else doing this? Okay, they're calling him Lord. Awesome, I'll do that. We don't actually take the time to unpack the implications of that. Like, what does it mean to call him Lord? And how does that affect how I interact with him? So we just learned about dyads, right? What are the implications on me if I'm going to call God Lord when I'm praying to him? So if he is Lord, I am what? So if I'm interacting with a teacher, I say, this person is my teacher. That means I'm a student. If this person is my king, that means I'm a, I don't know, citizen would be a modern term that we would use, or a slave, or probably not slave, but servant maybe, or like peasant is another term that comes to my mind. If this person is my mom, that makes me a kid. If this person is, my boss, that makes me an employee. So if God is Lord, what does that make me? What does that make me? So the term Lord implies that I am a servant, a slave, a citizen. It's similar lines as like king. If that person's a king, then what does that make me? That makes me a follower, a kind of subservient role. I'm here to serve. So with that in mind, let me stir some things up for you. One, did Jesus ever teach his disciples or us to pray to God as Lord? Did Jesus himself ever pray to God as Lord? Did the apostles ever pray to God as Lord? So what is your biblical basis for praying to God as Lord? Now, there are examples of people praying to God as Lord, even in the New Testament. Old Testament is very common. New Testament, it's not as common, but they are there. But I'm asking you these questions to challenge you of like, okay, is this just something I've picked up? Or is this actually how I want to approach him? Is this really how I want to approach him? I mean, have you ever thought about it? So at one point, here, this is interesting. At one point, Jesus says, hey guys, I no longer call you servants. Because servants don't know what their master is doing. I'm calling you friends because everything that God's revealed to me, I've told you about it. I've invited you into that with me. So even with that, Jesus is like, no, not servants, friends. Oh, so if you're a friend, if that's the title I'm assigning to you, what's the implication on me? That means I'm friend. That's different. It's a very different approach. Okay, so what did Jesus do? How did Jesus teach his disciples? What did he tell them? What title did he assign to God? How did he teach them to pray? So all throughout the life and ministry of Jesus, it's all about the Father. Exclusively, Jesus prays to God as Father. Exclusively, he teaches his followers to approach God as Father. So now we have this other title, right? Father. We have Lord and we have Father. This was a radical shift, by the way. Radical shift to approach God as a Father. I don't remember the exact numbers. I researched it once, but it's something like the term Father was assigned to God maybe like 15 times in the entire Old Testament. And it's like 166 times just in the 4 Gospels. So it's just a radical shift in approaching God from a different place. So what are the implications of calling God Father versus calling him Lord? Because in both of those titles, we're assigning to God a role that not only defines him and what we expect of him, but it also defines us. It defines us and how we are going to interact with him. So I'm going to propose that approaching God primarily as Lord has a potential to have major negative implications on how we interact with God. So if I'm going to God as my Lord, what will I be looking for? How will I be approaching him? How will I be interacting with him? I could be looking for things like instruction. Tell me what to do. Give me a command. Give me feedback on my performance. Am I doing a good job here? Are you pleased with my work, with my effort, with my service, right? What do you want me to do next? What's my next assignment? All of these things revolve around service, performance. Implicit in the term Lord is the concept of service, serving. I'm here to serve you. Now let's compare that to God as Father. If I approach God as Father, I could, now this very much depends on what I experienced of fatherhood growing up. My concept of God as Father is going to be very defined by my experience of my earthly dad, right? But I could be looking for things like a hug, snuggles, maybe advice, comfort. Maybe I just want to play. I have 3 kids. My boys, they're a little bit older. My daughter's too young for this yet, but when they come to me as a dad, all the time they want to play. They want to play. That's how a kid approaches a dad. They want to play. Okay, I don't approach a Lord to play. It's very, very different. It's very different. But I could approach a father to have a good time, to enjoy my time, to play. I could expect really, really, really bad dad jokes. I could expect food, provision, protection. All of these things would come naturally in an interaction with a father role. And some of those wouldn't fit very well in the role of Lord. So the theme of approaching him as Lord revolves around performance and service. The theme of approaching God as Father revolves around connection. Those are 2 very different things, and they both have their place. I think both terms are rightfully assigned to God, but we just don't think about it. We don't choose intentionally how we're approaching him. We just kind of flippantly go to our default with no understanding of the implications that our defaults have. So my challenge to you, my invitation to you is pay attention. Pay attention to how you pray. Pay attention to how that's affecting your posture and your expectations on God and on yourself as you interact with him. So what, as I'm teaching on this, are you paying attention, one, to what's going on inside of your heart? Are you angry about what I'm talking about? Are you frustrated? Do you disagree? Why do you disagree? Why is that important to you? And then just take a little bit of time and evaluate. Okay, what ideas or what names have I assigned to God? What name do I use when I pray? Okay, why do I do that? Have I ever thought about that? Evaluate that. Process it. Talk to God about it. And if your heart is responding to this with frustration and anger, talk to God about that too. If your heart is responding to this with oh wow, this is really life-giving, talk to God about that too. Pray from your heart. Pay attention to what goes on inside of you, the natural responses that kind of bubble up inside of you, and bring those things before God. And what are the implications of all these things as you engage him? So I'm inviting you to evaluate, and then maybe make some changes. Maybe try something new. Maybe you've never prayed to God as Father. Maybe you've never prayed to him as Lord. Maybe you've never prayed to him as friend. What are the implications of these things as you approach him? So I would love to invite you into deeper and more profound and holistic interactions with God. Love you guys.